All right, everybody, welcome to the Glass House. Lindley, excited about our guest today. We've got Chris and Nikki Ogden with us. They serve in Orlando, Florida. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you for having us. I'm glad to be here.
Give us a little bit about you two as a couple and the church you serve.
Yeah, so we are at Horizon West Church, which is a campus of First Baptist Orlando. We are about 5 exits from the Disney Magic Kingdom exits, and so we get to the benefit of a lot of people that move to the area just because they want to live here. They can, work from home or work remote, and so massively growing area of Central Florida. So that's kind of our work. We've been with the church for 13 years, with the campus for the last 5.5 since it started. Mm-hmm. And then as a family, you want to share?
Yeah, we've been married 14 years next month, and have 3 kids that are 11 and a half, 10, and 7 and a half.
And my understanding is that campus has really grown. Like, it's been a lot to keep up with.
Yeah,
right?
It has. We launched 18 months before, March of 2020. And so we went through kind of two birth and a rebirth. Coming into, I think it was January of 2022, we were just in that treading water survival mode, a couple hundred people, and just having really honest conversations, even with leadership at the Central Church of, hey, is this something we can continue to do? And so we believe that core group of people that we had was committed and was all in. And so, the last 24 months, really, we've seen tremendous growth, and God's been really good to just kind of keep sending people to us. A great team. So it's been a good journey.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, the subject at hand is time management, and every pastor and pastor's wife does this differently. But Chris, just start by telling us a typical week. How do you, in a week when you have control?
So in April of 2022, those weeks are hard to come by. The ideal week for me, Ben and Lindley, kind of the way we've structured my week is, first thing Monday morning, I'm getting the kids off to school or whatever. That's kind of first, but then I kind of ease into the week with catching up on emails from the weekend, or those 3 to 5 to 12 things that didn't get done the previous week that become the top of that to-do list. And then about midday, I shift on Monday. I have we have 2 full-time staff, so I have standing meetings with each of them, with our campus director on Monday and with our worship pastor on Tuesday. And so I meet with the campus director about midday, and then I keep the rest of my Monday open for counseling appointments, just people that need time to work through whatever it may be. Sometimes that's even a new attender that wants to learn more about the church, but I keep about 2 to 3 hours open on Mondays for that. Tuesdays, I start every Tuesday. I meet with 2 guys that are not a part of our church. They're not connected in that way, but we meet for kind of what I would call relational accountability. These have become really, really close friends. And so that's one of the things I most frequently do. Like, if there are other meetings that have to shift or move, but those guys
protect that time the most.
Really, really protected. Yeah. So, if we have to, shift days, we do, but Tuesday starts that way. And then I spend the balance of that day at our central campus. That's where all of our, all staff meetings with all the campuses, where content meetings with our lead pastor, David Youth, and the content team. I'll meet with my direct report. When we meet, it's on Tuesdays. My second one-on-one with staff, our worship guys, Tuesdays. So that's kind of a death by meetings day for me. And then coming to Wednesdays, early morning, Bible study, 6:30. I keep Wednesday mornings open for breakfast appointments. I try to, the way that I make myself available is to find different times of the day and different days of the week. So in other words, if I had, just Wednesday afternoons for one-on-ones, the guy that travels, for work is never going to get time with me, or the person whose work shift doesn't give them that flexibility. So, Monday afternoons, breakfast on Wednesday morning, and then Thursday lunch. Those are my, you can get time with me, available opportunities. The rest of Wednesday is, we do our midday staff meeting. I'll keep myself open to meet with our part-time staff that I don't meet with every week. So that, coming out of the staff meeting, I might get some time with our groups coordinator, or it could be our student director, those kind of things. And then Thursday, really, other than that lunch appointment that I keep open, that's my sermon prep day. I've tried to a little bit touch it like Monday. I try to read the passage and kind of get those big rocks in place. Yeah. But Thursday is like the drill down, 6 hours, 7 hours of just diving into that content. And you said ideally, I've got that done by Thursday end of day, and I've sent my notes off, and everybody's happy. But that does not often happen. So.
Yeah. My favorite line from that, Steve Stroop once said that when the music guys start making up new music every week, they can complain about the sermon showing up late.
You're going to get in trouble for that.
I loved that. That's so good.
I want to chime in for Nikki. So you are not on staff per se, like per payroll, but I know that you do a lot for the church. So talk a little bit about your week, because you have another job and you can talk a little bit about that. So how do you balance expectations from the church, your other job, and then your job as a mother with 3 small children? So, I mean, give us a little bit of your week.
Yeah, so it's funny, I work out of the home, but in the home. So, I work for Lifeway. So I work on several different podcast shows as a producer and different roles in that. And so that offers for me to be able to work from home. And so really while the kids are at school, I try to get that work done while they're at school so that I can be more present whenever they are home. And so, we were just talking about this. My involvement with the church has looked different in different seasons. I feel like we have our congregation at Horizon West Church is just so wonderful and healthy. And I just have never felt pressure from them to be at all the things. And so the only pressure that I really put on myself is from myself to be,
Yeah.
But it's actually, honestly, I'm not just saying this because we're on the show. It's been helpful to listen to the Glass House and to listen to the different wives and hear that different seasons of their life have looked differently in their, service to the church. And so I may not be able to make the women's coffee every Saturday morning because my daughter's playing soccer every Saturday morning,
Right.
But I've never felt like that pressure from them. And then the Saturday morning that I do show up, I feel so loved and welcomed by them. And so that's really been just one of God's greatest gifts to us. And this hard church planning season is just the lack of expectation, but the welcome that I have felt too. But we have been talking about it. I mean, ideally, I would love to be going to lunch with, women from the church or mentoring and stuff like that. And right now during the week between, the kids, their schedules, their sports, work, and then we do a ton of life with our neighbors. There's not a lot left, and so we've actually been kind of transitioning a little bit of what Sunday mornings looks like for me, since we're already there, we're already together, that time is already spoken for, and just being more available and serving that way on Sunday morning.
That's interesting she just said that way, because the other day, I know you love your job. You really
Wait, which
do.
part? What did she
Hold
say?
on, I'm about to say.
Okay.
The other day you were like, man, I love my job, but why am I working today? I do think with all the stuff that a woman has to juggle with the kids and all that stuff, let's just be honest, the details fall on you.
Well, Nikki, you're going to understand this. So my job is part-time, like air quotes for the listener who can't see that. But part-time in my personality, I'm a driven type personality. And so part-time is really more and more and more every week. And my work does not put any pressure on me to do more and more and more, but I just like it. So then sometimes, of course, now we're in the spring season, it's really beautiful outside. And sometimes I'm like,
on Zoom calls while you could be outside.
why am I doing this to myself? Because I like it, but then I also don't want to be doing it. So, I mean, I'm, almost 44 years old and can't figure out what I want to be doing.
Well, and to your point, Nikki, it looks so different for us now with 3 high school boys and a daughter at college than it did when they were running around toddlers. It's just such a different time management scheme.
Well, I loved what you said just as far as seasons. I think that I've been really bad about understanding how things ebb and flow. Because even right now, our boys are in a sports season. So many days they don't get home until almost 5 o'clock. So really, I'm not like, oh, everyone's going to be home at 3:02. They're going to be home at 5. So it's more time in the day to figure out. But then I'm like, well, it's 2 more hours to work every day.
Yeah.
Versus investing in people or something.
Well, and I just like for everything to be planned and prepared. And I'm having to let go of that a little bit in this season. I'm having to say, oh, we have a few Friday nights off in between volleyball seasons. Why don't we spontaneously invite the staff over for a game night? And I think one of your couples recently shared this, not be offensive for anyone that can't come, but then it's we're offering time with them, also, and it's not planned, it's not prepared, we don't have a budget for it, people are going to bring different things. And so I'm trying to lean more into when so much of our life is scheduled and planned, lean into the little moments that don't have to be planned and prepared and perfect.
All right, Chris, what's the hardest part for you? What's the part that every week you're like, I don't have enough time for blank?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's definitely sermon prep. I feel like it took me 8 years to do my MDiv, and the experience of
We had
seminary.
traumatic births during
That's
that
true.
time, so it
Yeah.
just depends.
We had three NICU journeys. We planted a church. We had a lot going on, but so time management was tough then. But when you're in school, and especially anything postgraduate, it could be seminary, it could be MBA. I mean, it could be any number of things. But that feeling of a looming deadline that you're never really done. There's always another paper, another test to study for, more to read. And and I'm not a super academic person. That wasn't like my lane, and so when it comes to sermon prep, that is a looming deadline every single week. I probably preach around 40 times a year. Some guys do a little more, a little less, but that's kind of where I'm at. And so, it's not a small task. And Ben, you certainly know this from pastoring and preaching. You want to give your very best to something, and you have such limited time. I mean, we're tackling, things. We went through the book of First Corinthians last year. It's like, man, you're preaching on stuff that you don't cover in seminary, and you've got 3 days to figure out what not only the text is saying, but how that integrates in the lives of other people. So that's a constant sense of, man, I got to get this done. And I think what makes that hard is, my tendency is to be responsive, and especially to be responsive to people. When somebody says, hey, pastor, I need time with you, it's like, man, my 4 hours for sermon prep just became 2.5, but I'll figure it out. Like I'll bite the bullet. I'll do that. And so it's kind of that tension I think anyone in ministry feels where, the shepherd teacher, as a shepherd, you want to respond to the needs of the flock. You want to step into the challenges, the difficulties, the counseling. But as teacher, you want to do honor to the word of God and not just kind of fly by the seat of your pants. And so I'm learning that balance, but certainly sermon prep is something I feel some angst over, especially by Thursday, Friday, sometimes Saturday, going, man, I got to get this thing done. And
Nikki, how stressed do you get when that sermon prep is not getting done?
Yeah, I don't like it because then that will spill over into our time, naturally. And
Yeah.
so I am more of someone like I'd rather you come home late every night in this season when our kids are a little older, So I'd rather you come home a little late every single night, but then our time be our time, rather than like on a Saturday, hey, I'm going to need 3 hours to sermon prep. That's where it gets, kind of dicey sometimes.
Are you guys similar or opposite in time management?
Opposite in everything.
Yeah, that question was longer than it needed to be.
Yeah. No time management needed.
Opposite.
So this is very interesting. So they're very similar. It sounds like they're similar to the interview we just did with the skipper. So you're
Yes.
more relational, hands-on, responsive to people, Chris. And Nikki, you like set a schedule and try to stick to that schedule.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so how do you guys work that out when there's disagreement?
If he would let me run his life, there wouldn't be disagreement.
She actually just this past week set me up on Calendly. I'm like the latest ever adopter on that. But, I'll have 6, 7, 8 exchanges back and forth to schedule one 45-minute meeting with a person I've never met who came to the church one time. So she sat down and she said, okay, here's how we're going to do this. You're going to send them. It feels impersonal. Like, it's like, hey, here's my thing, and you pick a time. But it is becoming necessary. And I think that's probably the theme, Ben and Lindley, of the season that we're in as a ministry is my desire to be accessible to people, which I think is healthy. I think that's, I think Jesus was wildly accessible to people. So many of the miracles and even the teachings are somebody interrupting Jesus. You know what I mean? It's not like, it doesn't seem like he set out and been like, this is my 3-year calendar. He had one really important appointment at the very end of that 3 years, but almost all the rest of it was like, hey, this person grabbed the hem of his garment, and this guy ran up and said, my daughter's dying. And this person said, teacher, what good thing must I do? And he's just responding. So I think there is something in the spirit of Jesus that is accessible. I think pastors need to be. But what I realized was that desire, although I think it was right, has started to create a bottleneck because I'm accessible to everyone. I'm not really accessible to anyone, and especially not to our staff, our deacons, our leaders. So there's a handing off, a delegating, which certainly Jesus was doing all the way through his 3 years as well. But I feel like I'm kind of behind the 8 ball in that. I haven't done that well. Now we're a church of, 630 on a weekend, and all of those requests are doubling and tripling. And now I'm going, I got to catch up. I got to figure out how to manage not only my time, but my staff and our deacons and our leaders in such a way that they are carrying more and more of the ministry.
Yeah. I think the leadership
Yeah.
that was required of him 24 months ago is not the leadership that's required of him right now. And so changing that leadership in 24 months, that can just be difficult.
Yeah.
But I will say, in the 14 years of being married, I have really learned to respect his value on relationships, because 14 years ago, I was definitely all about the task. And if people paid the price for that, then it didn't really matter because I felt productive, So I've definitely learned while it does cause tension sometimes, for sure, if we just placed a different priority on something, but I think we've come to respect both parts of it. He lets me set him up on Calendly, and I'll give him a pass every now and then on his lack of time management.
Do you guys have a story that you could tell about a situation where you didn't agree on something and how you kind of worked it out together? I mean, I'll give a short example. We interviewed a couple one time, and they talked about on Christmas morning, there was they were opening presents with their small children, and there was a death, and the pastor, the dad, had to leave, and it was really hard on the woman because she understood why, but it was Christmas morning. I mean, do you have any stories like that of where you just really disagreed but had to come back together?
It was more so, talking about seasons, it was more so when they were little. I mean, we had 3 kids in less than 4 years. And so while we were growing our family, he was growing in ministry. And so he was kind of taking on more and more. We came as college pastors that flew under the radar and got to hang out with college kids, and then as we're having children, now he's under college and young adults. Okay, now he is over groups ministry, which, is being now commissioned to form groups off campus for the first time. And so during that season, where I just felt like I was drowning by myself with 3 little kids. I remember we had 3 babies at home, and 2 out of the 3 were sick, and 1 had hand, foot, and mouth. Terrible hand, foot, and mouth everywhere. And he was getting on a plane to go to a pastor's retreat where someone was cooking him food and serving him.
Yeah.
Definitely in that season. Yeah, it was harder. You guys get it. Now the kids are more independent. I don't mind those times alone with them, at all now. But I think in that too often you're growing your family and you're growing in your career or your ministry at the same time, and that can just be hard.
This is why everybody loves being grandparents. Next question is on time management. I want to ask you guys, if you could talk to a young couple coming right out of seminary or taking their first church, what would be some general principles you'd say, hey, just keep an eye on this and related to time management, or what advice?
Yeah, I think for me, and I'll answer, Ben, for the person who's more wired like me, I think it's almost different advice for different people depending on their natural bent. Some people are so driven and so calendared that you need to say, hey, dude, loosen up. But when it comes to a person who maybe is, let's say they're going into pastoral ministry, their heart is God and people, man. And I'm here. What do you need? I'm available. I would just say something very simple: schedule everything. When are you returning emails? Put that on the calendar and only do it then. What is your sermon prep time? Early on, I didn't calendar sermon prep. It was just kind of it has to get done, so I'll have it done by Friday. And there would be weeks where I would literally go back and look at my calendar, and that had backfilled with every meeting that changed. That, hey, we're part of a large church with several campuses. We just this past week got hey, that 1 hour meeting at 11 o'clock on Tuesday is now an hour and a half meeting starting at 11:30. I had a lunch meeting that day. I had to scramble to, so it was so reactive and so little was calendared if it wasn't like an appointment or Sunday morning church, that I just gave away too much time. I just let everything kind of slide. And so by just putting it on the calendar, I can say honestly to somebody, man, I actually don't have that time available. Or now with Calendly, thanks to Nikki, now I can just say, hey, here's the times I am available. And that is already paying a lot of dividends. Because the thing that I've come to is everybody can have access to me, but not everybody can get access to me next week.
Yeah.
If it's a death in the family, if it's a crisis, obviously we need to be flexible and respond. 98% of things are not that, and they can wait for 2 weeks. And I've also found people who didn't want to wait 2 weeks and they found somebody else to meet the need. And it's like, okay, I don't have to be the superhero that steps into everything. So just putting a calendar together and protecting it as well as possible would be kind of how I speak to somebody coming out of something.
That's good.
I think this is so interesting because, like you said, knowing yourself, and our last guest talked about that. Ben hadn't even talked about his sermon prep when he was a pastor for so
Yeah.
many years. But his personality is that he's most creative in the morning. And so he would always write, we'd schedule it out. He would write from like 7 to 11 a.m. every morning. And then he'd have, 11 for starting with lunches and all afternoon meetings, because you can be relational any time of the day. But by the end of the day, we call him afternoon Ben. Like there's morning Ben and there's afternoon Ben. And he just fades throughout the whole day. And so we're like right in the morning. I mean,
Unless there's March Madness on, which there is today. I'll be excited today.
okay, well, right. But if you ask his assistant or anything, we know like, oh, it's afternoon Ben. This is not going to be good. You did that. And then
Yeah.
also, I agree. We had that same conversation of like in the real world, like if I call a doctor's office, they're not going to see me this week. I mean, I called a dentist the other day and they were like, your appointment can be in July. So, I mean, we forget about that when it's not life like a crisis to say, oh man, you know what? We've got some things going on. It'll be 3 weeks from
Okay,
now.
but I got to put the other side of the story in. I do not like it when people treat me like that. Hey, yeah, I'd be happy to see you. I can see you in 3 weeks. I'm always like, seriously, you're that busy? We can't have a 10-minute conversation. So I think there's a tension pastors feel in terms of, I never want anyone to feel like they're just like an appointment.
I feel like you treated me rudely just there.
I'm sorry.
And Ben, I'll speak to that because I've the few times I've reached out to you, I feel like you are surprisingly responsive, and so I do think you model that well. But there's got to be attention in your role, and knowing the access points that people want to or some that need to have to you. That's tough, but you do model that well.
Let me be clear. I have like, I'll tell Lindley sometimes like, hey, I called so and so, and they're not able to, I'm not able to see him for a week or two, and I'm very rarely offended by that. But I also always appreciate it when it's particular someone like you and I, Chris. We have some history together, so like if you reached out to me, I would feel some sense of like, oh, Chris needs something. I don't want to tell him that I'll see him, in June.
He thinks every meeting has to be a like 90-minute lunch meeting, and so that is the difference too. To where he'll say something, and I'm like, could you call that person on their way to work? I mean, you drive 25 minutes every day, and just see what they want before we put an entire lunch on your calendar.
She's right.
So I'm not saying ignore them and put them off 3 weeks like you're a doctor. I was just saying call them, touch base with them, and see if it's a crisis or if it's like, oh man, I just wanted to catch up. Well, let's catch up in a few weeks.
Being accessible, I think, as a pastor is super important. I mean, that's just kind of the model and the type of ministry we want to have. But that doesn't mean all access. I think he and Chris and I try to give each other all access. Like I try to pick up the phone whenever I can when he calls. He always, like, that's kind of been something in our marriage. When I call, he tries to pick it up, but it doesn't happen 100% of the time. And so why would we think that we can have that type of accessibility with our members, But the second part of the conversation is the expectation on the pastor to be so accessible and to be the one doing all the counseling or all the premarital or saving all the marriages or talking through all the finances. Like, there are saints in the church that are equipped, that may not be on the payroll, but they may be more equipped in some of those areas that we even are, And I think there's ways that you can equip other members of the church that are probably better suited for some of those roles than we even are, But just because they don't have the title or the payroll doesn't make them less,
Well, and in some cases, we have people in our church who actually are licensed counselors. We have 2 or 3 in our church. I'll give a part 2 to the answer you asked earlier of what would you tell somebody out of seminary. One of the things I found myself falling into was I was free, unlicensed counseling for people who had really dire ongoing needs. And there was one young man in particular that after the 4th time I met with him, I went, hold on a second. Like, this guy's not being discipled. He's being counseled. And I'm not a counselor. I wasn't trained. I took 1 class in pastoral counseling. Right. But B, counselors are expensive. And this guy found a loophole. He could get me once a week, and it was draining the absolute life out of me. And so there is a tendency, I think, that we have, and I'll just be honest about something the Lord's dealing with me on right now. The other day, I had this thought in my mind that I said, accessibility is my superpower. It's the thing that differentiates me. I'm not the most dynamic speaker. I think even in my speaking, the gift is that it's accessible. People go, yeah, that made sense. I relate to that. It's not, and the same thing with my calendar. And it's just like, man, you can get as much of me as you want. Like, I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to be there. And God immediately, when that thought came in, said, this is not a superpower. And you have no superpowers because you are not a superhero. And, for a lot of us, I think, especially in ministry, there can almost be a subtle God complex. We're God's man to step into that marriage and that situation and that leadership crisis and limitations, embracing limitations. I think that's probably been one of the biggest benefits with Nikki is she sees those a little bit more clearly than I do. Sometimes I see them more clearly for her and she sees them more clearly for me, but just going, hey, I'm going, well, I got the sermon done and it was actually pretty good, and she's going, yeah, but all weekend you were heavy, you were distracted, you were not, you were physically present, but not otherwise. So I think embracing those limitations and then letting other people do the work.
We got 5 minutes. Let's play a spontaneous game with the Ogdens.
I love spontaneous.
Okay, I'm going to go first.
Okay.
I'm going to go first. I'm going to throw it to you for a question. And if you can't think of one, I'll feed you one.
Oh, well, just go ahead and assume
Okay,
you'll feed
so time management. Which one of you makes the other one late?
I'm pointing my finger for the listeners. I'm pointing my finger at my wife.
I do. So as much as I like the schedule and the time, I don't like being early. It's awkward.
Well, let me clarify. She makes us later. Either one of us will be late to any appointment, but she makes us later than I would.
She's right, though. It is.
You don't like to be early?
No, I pulled up to our kids are in private school and there was one of my first private school moms Christmas parties, and I pulled up to the house and there were no cars, and I drove around that neighborhood for about 20 minutes looking at Christmas lights, waiting for other people to show up. There was no way I was going in first.
That's hilarious. All right, you got a time question?
No, I can't do that.
All right,
quickly.
I'll keep going. Sorry. Chris, are you good or are you not good at staying on time with your sermon?
Relatively good, although the series that we're in right now, I've been egregiously over. We're doing the I am statements of Jesus, and I'm just enjoying it. And this is one of the things with sermon prep. You've got to not only have the time to craft it, you have to have the time to whittle it back down. And so typically if I go long, it's not because I have over prepared, it's because I've under prepared. But I would say I give myself a B- on time.
Okay. The children's person, which is normally Nikki, right, is like wrap it up in
More
there.
Recently, these last few weeks, the kids volunteers have been like, what is happening? I'm like, it's the Holy Spirit. It'll be okay. We'll be out of the series after Easter.
Jesus' I am statement should be, I am finished. Stop. All right. Last one. Which one of you is more likely to get into conversation and lose track of time?
Probably you. I feel like I'm throwing you under the bus, but you. So we said earlier, she's more schedule, I'm more relationship. I'm more broad relationship. I have 10,000, people that are, but she has a much narrower relational threshold, but she goes very, very, very deep. I mean, she can talk for an hour, 2, 3 hours to the circle that she has. I'm more, hey, I want to get to everybody. And so you're each going to get about an hour. I'm moving on. So
he's the one that he's like, hey, I'm going to go run and fill up your car real quick, and comes back 2 hours later because someone from church was with him at the gas station. So there's that too.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, here's a better way to think about it. Like at the end of church, when you're trying to get out the door, who's normally still talking?
Oh, that's me.
You. Yeah.
All right. Well, any other thing you guys want to throw in here about time management or a tip or anything you've learned along the way?
Honestly, I think about the guy that, he's, and we've shared on a kind of one-dimensional level with time management and things related to that. But, ministry is just very, very hard. And, life is hard. Everybody's got hard stuff going on. We've gone through a lot of hard, and there are things in your marriage, there's things in your ministry, your church that are not yet anywhere near where you want them to be. And to the guy that's in that place, to the couple maybe that's in that place of going, I just don't see that. I don't see this changing. There are seasons, and some seasons are harder than others. There's a reason that Scripture says it's required of a servant to be found faithful, because that commitment to just remain faithful in your marriage, faithful in your ministry. You'll go through the ebbs and flows, but God will be gracious. Jesus said, I'm going to build my church and the gates of hell aren't going to prevail against it. And so, there's things right now that the church, I go, man, we should be doing way more and reaching more and seeing more fruit. And even just spiritually, man, we didn't baptize as many people on this given year as we should have. But just to stay patient, trust God with the process, and He gets the glory. He does the work.
That's awesome. Well, guys, loved having you on the show, and thanks for making the time.
It's good to see you. Thank you for giving us time. Yeah.
The Glass House is executive produced by Angie Elkins, edited and engineered by Donnie Gordon with help from Nathan Howard. Show notes and production help from Nikki Ogden. Photography by Emily Bergeron and Bailey Watley. Recorded at the Lifeway Podcast Studio in Brentwood, Tennessee.